Hi, I'm Lydia. I just need to say that I'm not planning to talk about the white paper on population because I understand that that's a topic that we are addressing in another session at another JC. So just to clarify and set the expectations right, Jeremy and I have come here to talk today about politics in Singapore and the Singapore conversation. So if you have questions about the white paper, sure, we'll try our best to answer them, but that's not really what I'm going to be addressing in my talk today. So I'm talking about politics, and Jeremy's talking about the Singapore conversation, and I'm going to start off by hopefully getting you to answer a question about something that I hope that is familiar to you. I wanted to start off by talking about smartphones. Does everybody here have a smartphone? No? Oh, really? Who doesn't have a smartphone? Okay, who has a smartphone? Who has a smartphone? Oh, come on. So far, only like 10 people have raised their hands. So most of you have a smartphone? Yes, okay. And what kind of smartphone do you have? Do most people have an iPhone or something else, an Android? iPhone? Okay. Does somebody who has an iPhone want to come up here and tell me about his iPhone? Or her iPhone? Anybody? Or you don't have to come up here, you can go to the mic. Okay, yeah. Daniel, your friends have nominated you. Hey, thanks for doing this. I'm Lydia. You're Benjamin. Okay, this is Benjamin. Benjamin, tell us a bit about yourself.
I'm Benjamin from 12S28. Study physics, maths, chemistry, and econ.
iPhone 4, is it? iPhone 5. Wow. I'm still on iPhone 3. Okay, tell me how, when you were going to buy a smartphone, right, how do you decide to buy an iPhone rather than an Android?
Actually, I'm deciding on an Android now because the iPhone 5 battery lasts the lifetime is quite short. So like maybe 3 hours playing game on the iPhone, the battery is going to run out.
Okay, so we all know that, okay, correct me if I'm wrong, right, but Apple was the first to come up with a smartphone, right, and used to like pretty much dominate the market. So do you think that it's good that now we have Android phones and we have a choice? Or do you think that it would be better if we only had iPhones on the market?
I think it's better to have a choice because then there will be competition between the two firms. But
What does competition do?
competition allows firms to innovate better products, so that if not, we will be stuck on the iPhone first generation only if Samsung didn't come out with their S1, 2, 3, 4. The Samsung phone. Yeah, I think we should support Samsung now.
Thank you very much, Benjamin. Okay, I'm so glad that Benjamin came up and spoke to us. I wanted to start off with talking about smartphones because I've tried to pitch my talk about politics in terms of choice. And Benjamin said that he's glad that as far as smartphones go, he has a choice between Apple and the Android phones, especially Samsung, and then he says that we should all support Samsung. Okay. If anybody here is from Samsung, should be very grateful for that plug. But okay, in terms of Singapore politics, I wanted to talk about choice because for many elections, I think that many voters in Singapore didn't think they had much of a choice, and the People's Action Party was a bit like Apple when they had a big dominance of the market in iPhones. We had the PAP, which has been governing Singapore since 1959, and they pretty much dominated the political space here. Okay, so I know that you're not old enough to vote yet, but politics is a very big part of our lives, partly because when we choose people at elections, we elect the members of parliament, they form this body called parliament that passes laws in Singapore, okay? And not only that, given that we are a parliamentary democracy, the political party that has the majority of seats in parliament forms the government. And the government decides things like laws and policies which affect all of us here. And in education, for example, it's the government which will eventually decide whether we have the PSLE or the O-levels and all these kinds of exams, or how many universities we have in Singapore, how much resources to pump into education. So it has a big impact on our lives, is what I'm trying to say, who forms the government. Okay, so for this decade, 1991 to 2001, I put up here the number of seats that were contested at each election. And you can see that it was on this decline. We had, in 1981, 81 seats in Parliament, and the opposition parties only managed to contest 40 of them in 1991. Once they don't contest more than half the seats, the PAP essentially forms the government on nomination day, which means that even though we have an election with a 9-day campaign period where parties are trying to win your votes, the PAP has already formed the government even before the campaign and even before polling day when people go to vote, because the other side hasn't managed to put up enough competition for more than half the seats. Okay, so in 1991, they contested 40 out of 81 seats. In 1997, they only contested 36 out of 83 seats. And in 2001, they contested 29 out of 84 seats. I think that means that they only contested 1 in 3 seats. Only 1/3 of the seats were contested, which means that only 1/3 of the Singaporeans who were eligible to vote actually got to vote. If nobody comes to your constituency to contest the PAP, you don't get a vote. It's called a walkover. Okay, so in 2004, the Straits Times coined this phrase, generation walkover, for all those people who turned 21 in this decade, 1991 to 2001, because every time a general election came up, most of these people didn't get a vote. Okay, and this is the generation that was born between 1970 and 1980, because they turned 21 during this decade. And they would be most familiar with Prime Minister Goh Chok Tong, because in their growing up years, he was the man in charge of running Singapore. Okay, and the kind of like political activity they would be most familiar to them is probably giving feedback, because this was kind of like pretty much the only political activity that people participated in during those years. So in 2006, we see a turning of the tide. In fact, after the 2001 election, some people became so upset, I guess, at the state of politics in Singapore, and one of them was Sylvia Lim. She said that, after watching this decline in the number of contested seats, she decided to step up and join the opposition, namely the Workers' Party, and now she's the chairman of the Workers' Party, because, she felt that there's something wrong with the democracy where there are elections, but then very few people actually get to vote. So as a result of people like her, I guess, more people becoming interested in politics and opposition politics especially, or people believing that we need to have more of an opposition in Singapore, we see that in 2006, more seats are contested, 47 out of 84 seats contested, and that's the first general election since 1988 in which the PAP does not immediately form a government on nomination day. Okay, then in 2011 in May, I don't know how many of you followed that election, but there was a lot more excitement in that election than in previous ones. It was the most keenly fought election since Singapore became independent in 1965, and 82 out of 87 seats were contested. So almost everybody who was eligible to vote got to vote, except people who live in Tanjong Pagar GRC. And that's because the opposition party that planned to contest there didn't quite get their act together, so they didn't file the papers that they needed to. Altogether, 2,211,000 voters had a chance to vote if they chose to, and that's double the number that went to the polls in 2006. So, I mean, it was a huge change. I mean, young people who were never interested in politics, who didn't even know which GRC were in 2011, they were suddenly very interested. They suddenly woke up and said, okay, I better go and find out, first of all, which GRC I'm in, who are the people who are contesting in my GRC, because I have to go and vote. And I met this young lady called Jessica Lim on nomination day in 2011, and she told me that never in her history, not since she was born, has she seen such ground-level engagement in politics. It was a very exciting time. Young people, were volunteering for the opposition, helping them campaign, helping them organize their rallies, etc. Okay, so this is the result of the 2011 election. Does anybody know what this picture shows? Any volunteers? Just shout out the answer or go to the mic. Anybody? Oh, yeah? Okay, George, you lost. Okay, what was the significance of that?
Firstly, my name is Kinsman, okay, from 14SO1, yeah. This one is George Yeo lost during the 2011 election, whereby they lost an alternate GRC to the Workers' Party. This is the first time the opposition clinched a GRC since independence, yeah.
Okay, thank you. Yeah, so he's absolutely right. It was the first time the PAP lost in a GRC, which is a group representation constituency where MPs contest as a team rather than singly. And in this team, you see all 5 members of the PAP team. It was led by George Yeo, who was then Foreign Minister. In fact, there was another minister on the team, which is the lady on the extreme right. She was Mrs. Lim Hui Hua. She was like a minister in the Prime Minister's office. In fact, the first woman appointed to a minister's position in Singapore. I think some people were quite sad that Mr. Yeo lost because, he was a well-regarded minister, considered very intelligent. He was very well-regarded internationally as well. And some people said that this was a loss for Singapore as a country. So the outcome of democratic politics, of competition in the political sphere, some people would say that it's good, like Benjamin said, that competition is good because it leads to innovation, right? The PAP, maybe it's like Apple, like if they were very dominant, then nobody pushes them to improve, to innovate, to get better. They get very complacent, they don't listen to the people. that was part of the problem, I think, in 2011, right? People said, wow, I've been telling you the trains have been so crowded for so long, and nobody bothers to listen to me. That we have too many foreigners here, and you ministers never listen to us. But the flip side of it is that somebody has to lose in a contest, and whether it was good for Singapore that George Yeo was kicked out of Parliament and out of government, I don't know. Mixed views on that. This is some of the excitement that we saw in 2011 at the Workers' Party rallies, because the Workers' Party was, by then the leading opposition party. They had good candidates, and they always got more votes than any other opposition party. So, I would just want to end my talk by saying that I think that when you guys turn 21 and become eligible to vote, you won't be like members of Generation Walkover. You'll have lots of choice. You'll be able to vote probably at every single election. You'll probably have more elections than you know what to do with. General elections, presidential elections, by-elections, and maybe you'll be generation choice. You'll have lots of choice as far as electoral politics is concerned. And it'd be a very different situation. Your situation would be very different from mine, because I started covering elections in 1997, and the first time I got to vote was in 2006. And I think that from what I saw in 2011, it is a great thing for young people to sort of like get involved in politics and to feel that, in a sense, like what I saw in 2011 was young people getting very excited and feeling like they were part of something larger than themselves, because they had a say in the future of Singapore. They had a say in choosing the men and women, who are going to make decisions that would be crucial for our future as a country. Yeah, okay, so last slide here is that, I have a slide about what democratic politics is. It's about contests, groups of people uniting behind different leaderships to compete, bargain, and negotiate in the shaping and sharing of political power, and to influence or control policy directions. And just to lead into what Jeremy has to say, I think there's been a new focus on engagement and consulting the public after the GE. And PM said in October of that year that the government will take a different approach in a new landscape, and they will work harder to engage those affected by its decisions. They will share more information, because government is not only about doing things, it is also about making people understand what we are doing, getting people to support what we are doing, and knowing what people would like us to do. And he also talked about harnessing the power of new media to engage citizens, and the new norms that will have to be put in place to encourage constructive behavior online. Okay, thank you.